Hi, it's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and I had been working on setting up basically jigs for cutting out the pieces, especially the ones that I do a lot of. And I had cut the adapter that came with I think it came with the saw. I keep forgetting to look up whether I had to buy it separately or whether it came with it. But you can check it out on Easy Saw, the Easy Saw rotating clamp. The website has all the information. In any event, I had cut a hole in the acrylic base plate, and then I drilled holes and used the clamps that came with the aluminum adapter, which I did have to buy separately. Again, if you haven't seen the videos, you should go back and watch them because I talk about this plate and all the things I've done with it. So this was a separate purchase. And so I basically was trying to use the acrylic one and set it up similarly. Not as pretty, you know, to cut pieces that were kind of medium sized. And so I was actually noodling on something completely different. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I could just cut different jigs that fit in the normal way you use the Easy Saw, and either cut it out of copper or this faux bone material that I own. And so I decided to try it with the faux bone because I already had a sheet going. I think this is the 1/6. It's either 1/16 or 1/8. It's the thinnest one that Robert Dansick sells. You could just look up faux bone, find his site, and that's the material that I'm using. He also sells the blades that work with it. And actually, these are the medium. I'm going to go off and use the fine for this material. And so what I decided was, so this is one of the pieces that I cut a lot of, and I started to sketch out. I already had one that was cut, and I started to sketch out that shape, and I was planning on cutting that shape out, but then I was like, oh, well, I usually use the same piece of, or about the same size of metal. And so then I sketched that out, and then I'm just making sure that if I, after it's pressed, I want to make sure that the hole is smaller than this. So I'm probably going to cut inside the lines for this. And I could set this up here and just kind of clamp it on two sides. That may be enough to hold it. I suppose I can give that a shot and let you know. But if I wanted to really clamp it down, what I'm planning on doing is just drilling holes on the side and then just using nuts and bolts to hold it in place, similar to the way that I set up my Swanstrom clamp that I use with the other adapter for teeny tiny pieces. So I am going to go off and saw, and when I get it all set up and ready, I will be back. Okay, I'm back. So I cut the shape out, and I'm trying to balance this because I still have my my clamp on the adapter that makes it cut on an angle, because that helps with the dust factor. So I've kind of marked some ideas for drilling holes. And then, like I said, I'm just going to drill through and just use nuts and bolts to hold the piece in place with washers. I may end up over the course of time having to drill other holes, but for now, I'm thinking this placement will work. And when I'm done with the drilling, I will be back. But I did want to point out, so this was the way the piece looked when it fell out of the hole. So I'm actually going to keep this piece. I'm going to file it. It's very, so you could even just use your fingernail to just clean off those rough edges. I did end up using the medium blade rather than the fine. The fine will just do less of that, you know, it'll be a little bit smoother edge, but I didn't really care for this purpose. And so if you've seen, I have another video where I used a thicker piece of faux bone to make a pusher for setting stones. It's really non-marring, and I am not good yet at setting stones. And so if I slip, I'm much less apt to wreck anything. I mean, I can still wreck something if it's super fragile just with pressure, but in terms of scratching, the faux bone doesn't scratch nearly as much, and I kind of smooth this edge. So this would just be a thinner, smaller version of this. So I'm probably going to go off and clean that up rather than tossing that little piece. So anyway, when I'm drilled. Okay, so I'm back, and I did go off and saw some, or drill some holes into the faux bone. And I matched the hole opening to the nuts and bolts that I'm using. And so I don't have the nut on the underneath part. I'm using the 8/32 just because that's what I was using with the other mini clamps. But you might have a different system. You might not want to have to match the hole. The holes may get stripped. So you might end up having to bolt or not use a nut from underneath. So again, with this system, whether you're using the faux bone or the copper, whatever you're using, then again, make sure that your holes are within that 2.5-inch opening in the actual rotating clamp itself. So I will say, having used this a bunch of times, I would, especially with this thinner gauge faux bone, or if you're using probably even thinner gauge metal, I would not cut that slit into the side. It moves, it's a little bouncier with that slit cut in. It's much easier to get your saw blade in that way, but I would probably just cut drill another hole where I could come in as if I was piercing with my saw blade and then saw around the shape. So it's working really well with just those couple of caveats. So if you've got faux bone, this is another great use for it. If you've only got metal, then go ahead and use what you've got. I will say there's gonna be another update to this video because I have come up with a different way of clamping my custom shapes. So look for that in the future. Okay, I am going to try to show you the finishing part of the sawing. So I've already sawed out or pierced the inner pieces, and I've sawed most of the way around. I don't have a great setup for filming this type of stuff, so the camera's probably going to shake. I may not include this, but if you are seeing it, then I did. And so I just wanted to show you that so far it's working. It's a little shaky because I only have the two quote clamps, which are just nuts and bolts holding the piece down. It would be a little bit sturdier if I had the other two, or at least one other. But for now it's working. So I just wanted to show you what it's like to saw on this thing. So hopefully I can see. I don't have my lighting on. Hopefully my head's not in the way. So you can see I'm getting towards the end, and so it's getting a little shaky. If I had this bolted down, it would be a little bit better, but it's still somewhat supported by the faux bone. I'm also getting to the section where I'm not sure if I'm gonna run into the faux bone, because I have it set up a little off kilter of what I had originally planned. And you can see I'm very slow. I really can't see at this point. I try to err on leaving too much metal, because with this setup, so one of the things with the clamp that's really nice is A, it saves my hand, but B, it's a little more secure because my hand is not super strong because it hurts all the time. And so I can go back in with this setup and use the saw almost like a file. And I've never really been able to do that. I know people talk about doing that. I was taught that you could do that, but I was never really able to do it. And so again, if I had, another screw here, I wouldn't have to use my finger, but I'm literally, there's almost no pressure. And I think I might be running into the faux bone, but it seems like it's working. And I really can't see these angles, so hopefully I'm not sawing the design off. Again, I'd rather leave excess metal and go back in and refine later if I need to. So here, I don't know if you can see it the way I have it set up, but there's a little excess metal. And so I was able, with this setup, to pierce and then cut around in one go without tweaking I'm trying to line this up. I might have to do this off camera. Without tweaking the things that are holding the metal down. So that was kind of my thinking with this, is to be able to do that without having to monkey around. Because, to me, it's worth having to monkey around just to be able to saw like that. But, some people might think it's too fiddly. And so, being able to create a jig it really hasn't taken me very long. So start to finish, this is probably about an hour. And I got that piece cut out, and now I've lost it because it fell. It's on my bench skirt somewhere, I would think. Oh, it fell onto my apron. So that's the piece all cut out. And it looks like I might have to do a little bit of either sawing or filing, but very little. And I left a piece up here just because I wasn't sure how I was going to use this, whether it was going to be a pendant or earrings or what. So for me, that's really good. Again, I never used to saw just because I was terrible at it. It hurt my hand. Piercing was crazy. I could never do it well. But with this setup, and especially now, if I can create jigs for the pieces that I cut out a lot of in very little time. So again, this is usable. So start to finish, including pressing, cutting this all, kind of noodling through it, cutting the jig, cutting the piece, it's about an hour. So, and obviously next time it'll be a lot quicker because now I know, I'll go in and add a couple of more. I'll leave this in, add some dots of where I really want the holes to be, and go from there. So anyway, hope you like this. And again, I did it in faux bone. I'm thinking you could do a heavier gauge copper, and it would also work. So if you've got copper laying around, and not faux bone, you might want to give the copper a shot first before ordering the faux bone. So anyway, I love this easy saw. It, like I said, I never used to saw. And it kind of stopped me from buying different impression dies and things like that, or trying different combinations of things if it required sawing. And now I'm not afraid of it, and I wouldn't quite say it's relaxing like some people think it is, but it's not annoying and not frustrating for me anymore. So anyway, hope you like this idea. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.